and to discuss what this missile strike actually means in Syria and what kind of implications this is likely to have for Syria and also the region at large. We're joined in our studios by former India's ambassador to the United States, Arun Singh. Thank you very much indeed, sir, for joining us in our studios here. Let me start out by asking you this, because this is something that everyone is talking about. Why did Donald Trump have to do this? Was there a necessity that Donald Trump did indeed need to go out and carry out these missile strikes on a scale which is much bigger than what had happened last time round?
So, whether it is justified or not in the international context, looking at it purely from Donald Trump's perspective, I think he felt he had to do it.
Okay.
If you recall last year in April, when there was a similar incident as they assessed in Syria, he had ordered missile strikes almost immediately. And the one reason for it is that he has tried to show consistently that he's different from President Obama, or that he's better than President Obama. And since President Obama in 2013 had assessed that it was not productive in a medium or longer term context for US to take military action against Syria, when there was a perception in the US and West of use of chemical weapons, he wants to show that he is different. And so that's clearly one reason. And having done that last time, this time, since they see it is a second time around, they have to do more. Otherwise, if you repeat the same thing, then people will ask, what have you done? So that's one set of compulsion. Going beyond that, within the US, Europe, West in general, there is also a sense that there is an international norm for more than 100 years against the use of chemical weapons. So if they believe that there has been a use of chemical weapons, then they must take some action to enforce those norms. Because the use of chemical weapons in a big way in the First World War had happened in Europe. And therefore there is a certain reaction in Europe and in the West to the use of chemical weapons. So that's the second reason.
If I could just interrupt you there. The fact of the matter is this alleged chemical attack that took place in Syria last time round, the Russians have in fact alleged that it is perhaps people in the West with certain interests who may have been behind this chemical weapons attack to try and get a premise to carry out a strike of this nature. And also the fact is, at this point of time, the politics in Syria is so complicated. President Bashar al-Assad is in charge of certain regions. There are these rebel groups who also have these chemical weapons, and we don't quite know as to who has used these chemical weapons. Do you think Donald Trump may have acted way too fast before it was established as to who may have actually used those chemical weapons there?
So situation within Syria is very complicated, as you have described. And for example, there's a statement issued by the Russian president today, where he has said that they had sent a team of Russian experts onto the ground, and they have not reported any indication of use of a chemical agent. There is a team from the Organization of Prevention of Chemical Weapons, which is supposed to go there and assess whether there has been use of a chemical agent, and that team's visit is pending. In the UN Security Council, France, US and others have tried to have a mandate given to an investigating team to go onto the ground and also fix responsibility as to who was behind that. So far that has been blocked. So in the international context, there has been no mechanism to establish whether in this instance there has been any use of chemical agents. So that's there. But US would also go by its own intelligence reports. And they have, the US, UK and France have said that on the basis of their intelligence reports and other reports, they believe that it has been used. And then their action would be based on what their assessment is. One can argue that this goes against the grain of international legality as such, because international legal norms require that for any military action of this nature, there should be either UN Security Council authorization or an argument of self-defense.
Absolutely. We'll discuss the implications in terms of legality. Was the United States, Britain and France who carried out this big military strike in Syria, were they in the confines of the legal norms that are expected, or did they step out of bounds? But the question which a lot of people are, of course, pondering, of course, is where did the United States fire its missiles at Syria from? Well, reports indicate that the naval strike force from Norfolk on the US East Coast, led by the aircraft carrier Truman, accompanied by other ships, could in fact be within striking range of Syria only by the end of April. Now, it has over 9,000 kilometers to cover, and other reports suggest that the US has one guided missile cruiser off the Syrian coast. That is the USS Donald Cook, is in fact armed with the Tomahawk cruise missiles and could also conceivably have carried out this strike. Now, the US also has nuclear-powered submarines whose location is in fact secret, but these could be deployed somewhere in the Mediterranean. Now, the submarines are also all armed with the Tomahawk missiles. Now, the Tomahawk missile also has a range of almost about 2,500 kilometers, so it is perfectly possible that they could have been launched from near any of the NATO bases in Greece and Italy to strike the targets in Syria. Lastly, the missiles could also have been fired from aircraft operating hundreds of kilometers from Syria. It would be difficult to in fact pinpoint what their location could be, but this is a fact that they have been able to carry out these strikes. These would have been, of course, well planned, but they have, of course, been able to carry out these strikes. Now, and also, Ambassador, if I could bring you into this. Now, the legality aspect of this, of course, will be questioned. Why did the United States not get the United Nations on board? The UNSC, of course, Russia would have vetoed it, but why not NATO? At least that would have given them a bigger coalition where they could have said, look, it was absolutely essential and we had to go ahead and do it.
So, international legality is not established based on the grounds I gave, but US, UK and France would assert that international norm has been violated from their point of view, and therefore they would have some responsibility for enforcing international norms. That would be their position. I think they would not have gone for NATO endorsement at this stage, because any NATO endorsement would take more time. It's a complex process. And several NATO members would have been reluctant to give that endorsement. Turkey is a member of NATO. And Turkey has been coordinating with Russia and Iran of late to deal with the post-conflict situation in Syria. There have been differences between Turkey and United States about the situation in Syria because of the US support for some of the Kurdish groups that Turkey opposes. Germany has also indicated that while it does not accept the use of chemical weapons, it would not participate in any military strike in Syria. So because of this, I think they would have assessed that NATO endorsement may have been difficult, but with UK and France, with them, they had wider international support compared to last year when it was just the US that had taken action. And you may recall that way back in 2011, in the context of Libya, again it was UK and France that were in the lead, US, as they said, supporting from behind, and they had gone ahead and taken action. So there have been contexts, given the balance of power in the world, where they have felt that they have the capacity and possibility of taking unilateral action of this nature.
Absolutely. And also, Ambassador, very quickly, looking forward, you know, the Americans, especially James Mattis, he's come out and said that, look, this is a one-off attack. They're not looking for an escalation. And also the French foreign minister here, he has made it very categorical. They're not looking for an escalation. They don't want a bigger, large-scale war. But Russia has said that they will retaliate. How do you see the Russian retaliation, and can we expect this conflict to actually escalate further? Or do you think that the military strike has been carried out and they'd all like to bury the hatchet here?
So I think US would certainly not want retaliation or any escalation, because they have made their point, and there is enough indication to suggest that Russia had been warned in advance or given information that some such attack would happen. There was a conversation yesterday between the French president and the Russian president where they talked about Syria, they talked about de-escalating the situation, and also in the attack itself, no Russian facilities or personnel have been attacked.
Interesting, yes.
And James Mattis in his statement said that no foreign presence has been attacked as a result of this. So, and Russia has of course said that there will be consequences. And what those consequences need not be retaliation, but it's an assertion that there are consequences flowing from the kind of unilateral action that the Western powers have taken. President Putin's statement has said that this has destroyed the international framework for conduct of international relations. So what they are doing now is saying that they are taking the matter to an emergency meeting of the Security Council. That gives time for people to mull over it. That gives a vent for dealing with this situation. And there need not be any specific Russian retaliation or escalation linked to what the US and others have done.